Hey, what's happening DC Gowan viewers? It's me, the DC Gowan 1, and welcome to the video. With the release of James Gunn's Superman this year, there's been a lot of discussion about the history of Superman in movies and television, and what makes a good portrayal of Superman. What's interesting about this discussion is that despite all of the different depictions of Superman that we've been given over the decades, there doesn't seem to be a consensus among fans about which portrayal of Superman is the best, or even a consensus on what makes a good Superman portrayal. It seems that no one is able to agree about what the proper way Superman should be presented is, and because of that, what makes one group of fans love one portrayal is exactly what makes another group of fans hate it. Which is a big reason why it's so difficult to make a universally loved Superman adaptation. We saw this the most with Man of Steel, which I would say is still probably the most divisive Superman film when it comes to how it portrayed the character. On one side, you have the fans who believe that the portrayal of Superman in Man of Steel is the best portrayal of the character, and see it as a thoughtful reimagining that perfectly captures the struggle of an all-powerful alien being trying to figure out who they are and what their role in human society is. And on the other side, there are the fans who believe it's the worst portrayal of Superman, believing that the movie took away everything that made Superman, Superman, and tried to turn the Man of Steel into the Dark Knight. Moving away from the lighthearted fun and optimistic tone seen in previous Superman and other comic book movies, and going way too far into the dark and brooding superhero movie trope that defined comic book films for well over a decade. This vast discrepancy really highlights just how differently Superman is viewed by different fans. And of course a lot of that is going to come down to how you were introduced to Superman and the stories you're familiar with that have formed your perception of the character. While I can't say what the best way to adapt Superman for a movie is, I do have thoughts on why it's a challenge to perfectly portray the Man of Steel outside of comics. Before you begin discussing how the character of Superman should be portrayed, you first have to decide who Superman is as a character. This seems to be where the split between fans stems from, as Superman has often been presented as a blank slate for writers and audiences to project themes and ideas onto. This has even historically been a criticism of the Man of Steel, that Superman as a character is boring because he doesn't have that many defining traits. Some fans view Superman as a symbol, a physical representation of the values of courage and doing the right thing. Other fans view him as a guardian, a protector whose purpose is to help people directly. While both of these views of the character have merit and can work in tangent with each other, they're more thematic story traits as opposed to personality traits. Superman's personality is another area of contention when talking about who the character is. One of the most prominent stances is that as an alien with immeasurable power, Superman should always remain stoic and not lose control of his emotions, as innocent people could be put in danger as a result. While it's a valid stance, and I agree that this idea should always be a part of the character, it becomes a double-edged sword when trying to portray that in a movie. And this is why I believe it is almost impossible to make a perfect film adaptation of Superman. What makes Superman's stories interesting has nothing to do with any kind of external threat. That's not where the intrigue is. You're not left on the edge of your seat wondering if Superman is going to win or not. He's Superman, of course he's going to win. That's who the character is. The physical embodiment of the unstoppable and everlasting power of hope and optimism. He's nearly indestructible and one of the most powerful beings in the universe. That's why the writers have to go out of their way to make up some explanation as to why Superman would even have a chance of losing. And even if he does get beaten, he always ends up winning eventually. That's another major criticism you often see about the character, that Superman is too powerful, which then doesn't allow much potential for interesting conflicts. That's one of the reasons there's not as many Superman video games as there are Batman video games, because there's no challenge and Superman should realistically be able to steamroll anyone and everything. That's why there hasn't been a solo Superman video game in nearly 20 years, and the games that have featured the Man of Steel in that time had to come up with a way to either nerf Superman or buff everyone else.
I should be dead. Thanks, Happy Pill.
What makes Superman's story interesting comes from an internal struggle, that being the idea of restraint and living in fear of his own power. Superman knows that he is one of the most powerful beings in the universe, and even though he sincerely means no harm to people and just wants to live a normal life among humans, and is constantly trying to show that he is not a threat, he knows that he is the most dangerous person in any room, and that he could do whatever he wanted to without consequences, because there's nothing anyone could do to stop him. And everyone else knows that, and he knows that everyone else knows that. He has to make a conscious decision to not take matters into his own hands, even though he easily could without repercussion. And at the same time, Superman is so powerful that he has to be extremely careful with every single physical action he performs, so that he doesn't accidentally hurt someone or cause damage. or also end up pulling a Goku and send Lois Lane through a building with a small tap on the shoulder. He knows that if he loses control or even relaxes at any point, bad things will happen, and that's a burden that weighs on him every second of his life.
I feel like I live in a world made of cardboard, always taking constant care not to break something, to break someone. Never allowing myself to lose control, even for a moment, or someone could die.
Now, while these traits make for an interesting character, they don't make for an exciting or entertaining movie. The challenging thing about portraying incredibly powerful characters whose powers are tied to their emotions is that you walk a fine line between keeping them in control of their emotions at all times and making them boring. And as an actor, you want to give a performance and emote, which can be difficult to do when playing a character who's expected to be stoic and composed at all times, because if the audience doesn't understand the deeper subtext of the character, it can come across as just bad acting. It takes a special combination of great writing, directing, and acting to portray that constant emotional restraint and stoicism, while still letting the character be a character, and allowing the actor to show human emotion. Because even though Superman's an alien, he was raised by and around humans, and we as an audience are supposed to be able to identify with him emotionally. So he's going to inevitably have those moments where he becomes emotional and makes impulsive decisions. That's the human side of the character that defines who he is. That's why I think it's good for Superman to lose control and let his emotions out from time to time. When Lois Lane dies at the end of the '78 film, Superman completely loses control of his emotions, and it's one of the best moments of the film, partially because of the juxtaposition to Christopher Reeve's charming and upbeat portrayal of Superman up to that point. When Henry Cavill's Superman breaks down after killing General Zod in Man of Steel, it still feels in character because it was warranted, because Superman realizes he is once again the last of his people. Tyler Hoechlin's Superman had multiple moments that perfectly captured Superman's understanding of the need to restrain himself even when his emotions do get the better of him, and he portrayed that balance of stoicism and human emotion incredibly well. And while these scenes are great, it's hard to make an entire movie of just that. When general audiences go to see a comic book movie in the theater, they're going there to be entertained. They want to see big action scenes and stunning visuals. They don't want an in-depth psychological analysis of a superhero. That's what cinema therapy's for. This is why I think it's impossible to do a completely faithful Superman adaptation in film. Because similar to the Hulk, to properly depict Superman in film, it would have to be a character study. A film about an unstoppable, godlike being who can do almost anything, who chooses to hold back and restrain himself, and lives in constant fear of accidentally hurting others. Now, while that's actually a really interesting concept for a story, it's hard to sell general audiences on a movie about a character who constantly chooses to not act, or at least not go all out, especially if it's a superhero movie. Which is why we so often see Superman movies come down to him fighting some big, strong villain that you already know he's going to defeat going in. Unless it's Doomsday, then you know he's going to lose at least once before coming back and saving the day. And while there's absolutely nothing wrong with the adaptations that do this, a lot of the ones that do this are amazing. There will always be an aspect of the character that doesn't get portrayed, because it just wouldn't make for an entertaining superhero movie. That's why I think that TV shows and cartoon series tend to have much more success with portraying Superman, because they have enough time to depict all the sides of the character. They can have a handful of episodes that delve into Superman's struggle to live among normal people, and then the next few episodes they can have him fighting aliens and robots, and the audience can choose which episodes to watch based on what they want to see. But a film isn't able to do that, especially if it wants to appeal to the masses, most of whom would probably not fully appreciate that aspect of the movie. I think what all of this goes to show is that Superman is a much more complex character than people give him credit for, and that there's much more to him than just being faster than a speeding bullet, and more powerful than a locomotive. He's a character who saves the day through his goodwill and just being there for people as much as, if not more, than he does through his physical actions and fighting villains. But let me know what you think. Leave your thoughts in the comments below about what you think would make the perfect Superman movie. And be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos.